Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, a show celebrating and questioning one of the most beloved entertainment companies in the world through honest, passionate, and clear-eyed Disney discussions. I'm Jeff DePauli, your entertainment-obsessed host with rose-colored glasses removed. On March 29th, 2012, a Disney theatrical smash hit opened on Broadway. Today in the show, we're celebrating, if you can believe it, the 10th anniversary of the Broadway musical Newsies. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for any period of time, you probably know that I'm fairly obsessed with Newsies and that it's one of my absolute favorite musicals. So today, I am very excited to have the Broadway production's choreographer, Christopher Gattelli, joining me to take a look back and share stories about the production's journey not only on Broadway, but also its development before and its life after. Christopher also shares stories about how and why certain dance numbers were choreographed the way that they were, what it was like searching for the perfect cast of performers, and so much more. Without further ado, now is the time to seize the day and watch what happens, or I guess more accurately, listen to what happens. Enjoy my conversation with the Tony Award-winning choreographer for Newsies the Musical, Christopher Gattelli.
Grab the confetti and celebrate a Disney anniversary.
Welcome to Disney Coast to Coast Drama Desk Award winner, Outer Critics Circle Award winner, and Tony Award winner, all for the Broadway musical Newsies. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Right off the bat, I've got to tell you that anybody who listens to this show knows that I am a huge fansy, so it really is a nice treat to have you here for the 10th anniversary. I can't even believe, I like legit cannot believe it's been 10 years since that show opened on Broadway. I saw it in the first month. I don't know, does it feel like forever ago for you, or?
I can't believe, well, it sometimes it feels like it was yesterday, and sometimes it feels like it was a lifetime ago. It's really weird that way.
Yeah, it is crazy. Now, Chris, I am a big theater fan in general, but I must admit that choreography and dance isn't always the first thing I pay attention to when I'm seeing a show, but in the case of Newsies, I am obsessed with your choreography, so I can't wait to talk with you all about that. But first, let's go back a bit further, because the original Newsies movie was released on April 10th, 1992, which means we're about a week and a half away from the film's 30th anniversary.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Do you remember seeing that movie for the first time? And do you remember what your honest thoughts were?
Yeah, I mean, the movie is a huge reason why I dance. I mean, I grew up in a small town outside of Philadelphia, and I think I was one of two boys in the entire dance studio. So dance wasn't something back then that I thought that boys did. I had idols like Gatelli and Fred Astaire and Gregory Hines. Like, you see them on TV and it's like, oh my God, they're amazing. But in terms of like, when you're young, you don't think of that period in your life when they're training. You just see the finished product. So you just see them as these kind of stars. So to see someone around my age interested in dance was not something that I knew, and I say too, this was before days of like YouTube and all of this. So you didn't have that kind of access to just seeing and connecting with people. It was just all very local. So I remember for the first time when I saw Newsies, I mean, I loved it just in general. I thought the story and everything was great, but just it blew my mind to see so many guys around my age dance so well. So, and it really inspired me to like work harder and just be more proud of what I did. And that like, wow, yeah, I am a male dancer and I'm pretty good. And just to know there was that community out there, I had no idea that many men danced and were that good at that age. So it definitely kind of inspired a big trajectory for sure.
That's really interesting, especially since you mentioned, the whole YouTube thing. I got to say right now, we're in an age, of TikTok where like dancing online has become this thing that honestly, I don't quite understand. Like everybody is dancing online and it's a really interesting time, but it's true. Like, you have people of all shapes, sizes, ages, races, whatever, just dancing online, whether just for fun or actually like professional dancers. And it is quite a different time from, 30 years ago when Newsies hit the screen. Not only you're saying, seeing dance influenced you, but like even just seeing a movie musical in 1992 was not a common thing. And, you know, everybody knows the story that the movie was a huge flop because perhaps it was just ahead of its time. But it's still interesting to hear you say that. And I love that you loved it from the beginning because I did as well. But I know a lot of people didn't, you know, when it first came out. So when did you first hear about Disney Theatrical putting Newsies on stage?
Yeah, this is funny. This is kind of like part two to that. So I was at a reading, an industry reading, and I ran into my friend Jane Abramson, who I worked with, about at that point, probably 5 years before or more. And I hadn't seen her. So it was like, oh my God, what are you up to? And she's like, oh, I'm working for Disney. I was like, oh, that's great. You know, because she is wonderful and amazing. And so it was just great to connect. And I was happy for her that, she had that opportunity. And, and just you ask, so it's like, oh, what are you guys working on? And she said, oh, we have this and this and this and Newsies. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I have to do that show. And she's like, would you want to? I was like, I was like, absolutely. I'm doing that show. I was like, I have to do it. And she's like, yeah, but I think we're starting at Paper Mill or something. And she's like, it's really just like, I think a one-off. And I was like, I was like, I just have to do it. And so she was like, wow, that's great. Then, she's like, let me check. And literally by intermission of the reading, she was like, okay, we have an interview in the offices for you for next week or something. And so I went in and just kind of talked like person by person through the, through Disney offices and got to Tom and kind of presented my kind of take on the show. And I think between him and Jeff, they kind of gave me the sign off. So it was very, very exciting.
That's awesome. Now, as you mentioned, before it went to Broadway, it did open at the Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey in 2011. And I've always heard the story, and you kind of touched upon this, that it was supposed to be, that was the end of this production, right? It was just going to be Paper Mill, and it would go on to be licensed for regional theaters and high schools and stuff. So when you were having that meeting with Tom Schumacher and Jeff Calhoun, who directed the show, and did you get that sense that it was just going to be that, it was not going to have a further life? And did you say to them, why not? Because that's the thing that blows my mind. To me, I'm like, this is a no-brainer. This should be on stage in a professional format. I don't know. Was that a true story, or did they really think it was just going to be Paper Mill?
I mean, as far as I know, it was always just going to be Paper Mill. And I don't know if they knew the kind of fan base that it had. So we would always kind of just say it kind of internally, or, kind of well, I mean, I can't imagine this is just going to be it because people are going to flock to this, and because we were all fans of it. And so I just don't think they maybe knew what they had on their hands in terms of just it being this cult classic of theirs. And that I think people were so excited to see it on stage that maybe they just had to see, well, they did, I guess, just see just in real life that there was this kind of want and need for this show to live on stage. So it was, but yeah, as far as I know, yeah, it was planned as just being this one-off, and we were all, and totally all just excited to be on part of that. We, from top to bottom, everybody was even if it's just the chance to do it once, how exciting is that? So yeah.
It's interesting. I'm not sure. I haven't met anybody who wasn't a fan of the movie but loved the stage musical. But I bet there are people out there who feel that way because, I mean, in my opinion, the stage musical is even better than the film, and I love the film. But yeah, it's the spreadsheets might say this movie was a flop, but clearly there's something about it, the music or the story, whatever, the dance, that really connects with people. And, it's pretty funny. It went to Broadway for a quote unquote limited run and then just kept extending and had a nice life on Broadway. And it's probably, I don't know this for a fact, but it's probably one of the most inexpensive musicals that Disney's ever put on Broadway, because usually they're huge, flashy, sets and expensive shows. And Newsies was built to be limited. So it's kind of ironic.
Well, I think that was part of, when and I'm definitely not saying this was by far my idea at all, but I do think I'll say that I recognize that, where some shows, they're made of these, fantastical fairy tales that that get turned into animation that then get turned into film. And so because they're so fantastical, as an animated property, I think, you kind of have to honor that in some way on stage to give it, some kind of way to make it just as fantastical, so which, that could be done in a lot of different ways. But the great thing about Newsies is recognizing that what's fantastical is the talent of the cast. That's the thing that, like, you don't necessarily need pyro when you have these dancers doing what they're doing. Like that's the fireworks, and that's what makes it so special. And I always felt that, like, as much as I love the movie, you kind of always felt that, in my opinion, that it just belonged on stage even more so, because to see that live, to see all of that happening live in front of you, there's kind of a kinetic just experience that you're watching, this cast sing and dance and act and just like doing it all in front of your eyes, something that's so spectacular that, that's not kind of taken care of by editors, or kind of like throwing your eye to this foot, or throwing your, to this group of three guys over here. It's something that just to see the full complement in front of you going, like, working as this kind of, incredible machine. I think that's just part of what makes the show so exciting to live on stage, is that you're seeing all of this hard work happen, like, in real time. And there's something you can feel it. It crosses the footlights so immediately.
Absolutely. And I think I saw it on stage between Broadway and tour like 7 times. And
oh my God,
I got to tell you, like, every time I saw it, it was that same energy. In fact, last night, obviously a bit of a different experience, but I was watching the taping at the Pantages that I was actually at live, and I was just rewatching it because, yesterday as I was preparing for this interview, I was watching clips, and like I got those immediate sensations back in my body watching clips. I'm like, forget it, I'm watching the whole thing again tonight. And it's very rare for something to come along that you can watch repeatedly or experience repeatedly and still get those same emotions as the first time. And Newsies is one of those rare circumstances. And one of the things that honestly kind of blew my mind was, I saw the original Broadway cast in that first run, in that first month, and I almost immediately bought another ticket to see it because, Jeremy Jordan in the show was kind of like a Star is Born situation. That's how I felt when I was watching him. And I was like, I need to see him again before his contract is up. So I bought another ticket for like within that first year. And of course he left to do Smash. And I was kind of bummed, honestly. But then I saw the show and I was like, you know what? This show just works. Like it doesn't depend on a specific actor. And then when the tour cast came, I had the same feelings. I was like, I don't know if this is going to compare to the, original Broadway cast. And then I saw it and was like, no, these guys are awesome. And an interesting thing that happened was the cast kept getting younger and closer to the age of what the actual Newsboys would have been, which I'm not sure why that happened. Maybe just younger people were becoming aware of the show or something, but I found that fascinating as well.
Yeah, well, I think part of that, honestly, I could talk days about the show because there are so many stories, but like, I think just to talk about that point about, the boys getting younger, I think, in a way, the show inspired young male dancers to work harder because a lot of male dancers were inspired by it and wanted to be in it. So they worked hard. And I think we would start getting these guys in who were just younger and younger because they got into class. There were a lot of people who came in the first round that were amazingly talented, but they weren't as necessarily polished and they're singing live. So they have to sing and, they're working their butts off. So whatever aspect of a performer's audition, like they didn't make it, they would go and work on that aspect. And then they would come in. There was one instance specifically about that where Demarius Copes, who came in to our tour cast, he was at the Broadway flea market the year before we were casting for the tour. And he went to the Newsies booth and he got a picture with the Newsies that were at the booth and was kind of told, the cast, he's like, oh, you guys are great. And he's like, oh, I would do anything to be in the show. And then like a year later, there he is, like on our first day of rehearsal, he brought the picture in and he was like, a year ago, I was doing the Newsies kind of like jump with the boys at the Broadway flea market. And now I'm in the show. And that's just like one of the stories that like, it was so nice to see this the cast keep getting refreshed with like newer and newer talent, and they were younger. And I always say that that's a testament to the cast on stage too, the fact that they were so inspiring and were so kind. They were great not only on stage but off stage as a family, and then at the stage door they were always gracious and generous. And I think that as well, on top of the performances, inspired a lot of people because they felt accessible and they felt down to earth. And so I think that's why the Fansies base is so big too, is because they're all just genuinely nice. The cast is so great just as people. So I think there's a lot to be inspired by just overall.
Yeah, and I think something very smart was done as well. I don't know if this was a Harvey Fierstein choice or what, but, a show with this amount of dancers, usually a lot of them are just called the chorus, right? Whereas in Newsies, they all have individual names, they all have individual personalities, and like you said, like the Fansies kind of fell in love with every character in the show, even the ones that would traditionally be called quote unquote chorus. And I don't know, how did that come about? Do you know whose decision it was to like really give them all individual personalities in a very specific way?
I wouldn't want to misspeak and give that credit to someone. I mean, I'm sure it was Harvey or Jeff. I'm not sure which, but I do know that regardless of the names, but like Jeff was adamant that, they all have specific personalities, and, even with the costuming, like just little details that someone's carrying around, a slingshot, someone's, so they all have their little kind of things. And I think, as silly as it sounds, even at the time, like they made the trading cards with all of the cast pictures on them, which we were like, what's happening? But it made the cast feel special because it wasn't like you're saying, like, I'm just an ensemble member, like that. Oh, I have my own trading card with my facts and my character's information on it. And I'm just as important. And they are. And the thing is, they are all just as important. Like you can't do that show without one cog in that wheel. I mean, everyone, they have their internal name as the Oldsies, but even like the Oldsies and, and all of the women in the show, I mean, like everyone in the cast, like everyone has like such an important part to play in the show, even though sometimes the boys get singled out or, that group of them, but like everyone is so important in it. And I think having the names and having that like is something like as simple as those trading cards, but like kind of instill that into the show and go like, no, everyone has everyone's important. And then it was sweet to watch the Fansies. Like, they all have, and then every character would have their own like fan page. It was really, really, really sweet to see their hard work kind of pay off in that way too.
Yeah, the marketing was very smart with stuff like the trading cards and stuff. Like it was. The show like this doesn't come along very often that gets, of course there are a lot of Broadway musicals and fans of them all, but like a hardcore kind of fandom is pretty rare, and Newsies did it, and the marketing team ran with it and did a spectacular job. Now, typically, how much does the choreographer usually have say in casting when it comes to a musical? And did it differ at all for Newsies, considering how dance heavy this show is?
It's hard to say. I mean, every show is different. I mean, I'd say, you go in and you have to build a puzzle and figure out, how many people are in the show, who has to cover who, because that's also a big thing that never gets mentioned as much. But, a lot of these boys, not only do they have to dance and do what they're doing, even if they are, I'll say in the ensemble, but then like you have to have Gatelli covers, and you have to have a crutchy cover, and you have to have, so it's like, so not only do they have to be that spectacular and everything else, but then they also have to cover, all of the principles. And so you really are looking for like all of these diamonds, in a show like this, so in any other show, I think I'm pretty realistic about like, okay, I get that, there's a big dance number here, but I know that there also needs to be a big vocal presence. So I'm happy to kind of like always meet people halfway and go, okay, well, I can, if you get this, I get this, and we can make all of this work. But in Newsies, I think once we kind of decided that the dance was going to be such a big part of the show, I wouldn't say I had more say, but I definitely, it felt appropriate for the show. I'll just put it that way. Like it was definitely kind of like, do you think they can do this 8 times a week and feel safe? Or they would say this person is, maybe not great vocally, but they're better singer. I mean, better dancer. It's like, okay, well then I'll take that one. But then if there's someone who has better vocals to support you, we can. So there was always a middle ground, even with Newsies, because the thing is, at that final call, I mean, I will never forget that day in my life. I mean, the guys were just everyone. And there were women there too, because we weren't sure then at that time if there were going to be female Newsies or not. So there were women there too. And I just remember the room was like electric. It was so, I mean, because I think they had all kind of gone through the first few rounds in bigger groups. But then when you got to the final call and you saw like, these were the, there were going to be 20 people, let's say, in this room that were going to be in the show. I mean, they were dancing their butts off. I mean, they were like literally flying. I mean, they were just, and I think in a way that wasn't competitive as it was like, they were all just inspired by each other. And I think in a way, to see a room full of your peers, like that, I think it had the same kind of effect that the movie had on me. I think when they were in that room, they saw like, oh my God, there's this many other amazing guys out there. And so I think it's just like, it really lifted all of them on that final day. And so there were literally, it was like we had an abundance of people to cast. So at that point, it was literally, kind of like, well, we needed this, because there were so many, talented people to choose from that it was really unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't know how they did that 8 times a week, like that's insane. I mean, that is tough on the body. Obviously dancers are very disciplined people to begin with, but I mean, this show, it's crazy. I'm tired watching them. So, and I mean, obviously you've had experience dancing in shows as well. Like this is one of the more intense ones, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it's a practice though that I do. I mean, it's in all of my shows. Like I've been in shows as a dancer where, you put your body through it and you get injured and, you have to stay out of the show for a bit. And, no one wants to get hurt, especially, looking at a cast like this when they are so young and there were, a million Broadway debuts. It's like, I don't want this to be your first and last show. Like that's, this is, you're all only going to soar from here. So, I mean, I make it a practice in all of my shows. I tell them like point blank, like if there's something that's on a side that it's not comfortable or something that hurts, just please tell me because I'll change it. Like nothing is that important to me than their kind of safety and their physical well-being. And the funny thing, I mean, there's a funny story about this that, as young and as excited as they all were, they were like, okay, but they really would never tell me.
Yeah.
So, they wouldn't really say it because they just wanted to, be spectacular. And I remember at the end of King of New York, this is my favorite story. We still joke about it with them. Breslin and Evan, but at the very end, were flanking Kara at the end of the number. And it was the da-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. It was like the different pops. And I was like, well, you guys are right there. What do you want to do? And they were like, well, I'm not sure, and they were both like, well, we could do back tucks. And I was like, you guys, I'm just saying, you've already done a full act ending with Seize the Day. And you just did like a 4-minute tap number. I was like, the last thing I think you might want to do here is a back tuck in tap shoes. They're like, no, we can do it. I'm like, guys, and they were like, no, we can. I was like, okay, but like, please don't get hurt. And so literally after we were running the show at Paper Mill, we were still in previews there. Like literally after 2 shows, they were like, can we take out the back tuck? I was like, absolutely. I was like, yes. And thank you for saying so. But in a way, like we laugh about it, but it kind of, I think by them setting that example, I think then the rest of the cast, it kind of opened the door for them to say as well, like, actually, can I do that pass with the other group from the other side of the stage? Because that's my better side. And so it made for a really, that's why I always say with the show, it was a collaboration with them because, we all built it together because I had to take that all into consideration, because I didn't want that. Like I said, I didn't want them to get injured and I knew they had to do it 8 times a week. And I have to say, knock on wood, that they, none of them ever got injured that badly that anyone was ever out of a run for, other than just being tired or something, but no one ever got injured. So I was always proud of them for that they took care of themselves.
Yeah, very cool. Now, as much as I wanted to see the show at Paper Mill, I did not get a chance to see it. So how much of the show was reworked between Paper Mill and Broadway? And there was even a little bit of reworking between Broadway and tour as far as the addition of Crutchy's song. But between Paper Mill and Broadway, were there any big changes?
What were the big ones? I'm trying to think of the big ones. I mean, I know that there was mandate kind of from Tom, which was really sweet, was there needs to be more dancing, which there already was a lot, but we went back through, Jeff and I went through the transitions and like really fleshed a lot of those out and made them dance and made them move a bit more. We extended King of New York a bit. We extended all of the numbers just a little bit, just to kind of, give them a little more air, which now feels really good. I know that Jeremy and Kara got a new ballad in Act 2, I think. There were I wouldn't say there were like major overhauls. It was still kind of what we had. It just kind of got puffed up a little bit, I think. So yeah, and then the tour was the same, with Crutchy's ballad added in, which was great to kind of see more of his journey. And but along the way, one thing too that I tried to make sure that whenever someone new came into the cast, I would always go in and re-choreograph it to suit their talents. So as people started leaving and we started getting the replacements, I would then go in and say like, okay, well, I don't expect you to do that pass or that, like, what can you do? And then they would say, well, I can do this. And so then we would just make certain tweaks to the blocking so that it was kind of like form fitted on that character. And then the same thing with the tour. Like we knew that we had our base, but it was a whole new group. So we kind of re-choreographed it to fit what they all did and what made them feel special and look special. So, which was part of the fun. I mean, it kind of the show always felt like it was growing and kind of getting better. And I think, people would see that, like fancies would come and go, oh, that's new. And like, they would say that like, oh, we saw that new thing in there, or we saw that so-and-so got moved and now they're here. And so it was nice that, it kind of kept it fresh and kept everyone on their toes for sure.
Yeah, I loved that about the show. And it was very clear that, the dancers had special skills that were used to the show's advantage. But that is not very typical, am I right? For a choreographer to go back in and change things just because it's a new cast member. Usually it's you hire somebody who can do what the original choreography requires. So like first of all, is that atypical? And if it is, who kind of decided we'll invest in that? Because, I mean, that means they have to keep bringing you in to work with these guys where at some point, typically, it becomes a dance lead's job or something, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I think we all kind of played a part in that for sure. It definitely wasn't just me. It was my associate, Lou Castro, who would go in, or the dance captains. I mean, we all kind of were looking after it all the time in various ways. So it was definitely an all hands on deck effort. But I do think how can I explain it? I think it isn't the norm, because I think most shows are pretty much set in what they are. I don't think many ensembles have this kind of unique a group that you could really do that with, if that makes sense. Like they all have so many standout moments in the show that it's you can do it. Like, for example, if I went back into My Fair Lady or SpongeBob, I really couldn't go back and change that much, because everything was a puzzle and it fits together. And so that person, whoever replaces in shows like that, have to just fit into the puzzle. And if there is, again, something that maybe doesn't feel good on a certain side, I would still tweak or recommend a version, which is fine. And I'm sure other choreographers do that too. But I think to the extent that we could in Newsies, I think it was part of the fun. And it was, at that point it was our baby. So it was a pleasure to always go back and kind of take care of it and, let the new performers show off as much as they could too. So it was a pleasure.
Yeah, it really was a joy to see those different tweaks with the different cast members coming in and out of the show. So thanks for doing that. That was cool. Let's talk about some of the numbers. Right at the top of the show, we get Carrying the Banner, which is a huge dance number. I love it. We see kind of the props are going to be a big part of the choreography in this. We get this with the slinging the newspaper bags over their shoulder and stuff. Was that something that you kind of set out from the beginning, knowing you wanted to incorporate kind of their job into the dance? Or how did that come about? Was that one of the dancers' ideas, perhaps?
It all comes down to storytelling. And we knew that we didn't have, the way the story worked, it didn't really take you to various locations. It didn't really take you to various, cities or countries. Like, it doesn't take you to where you might get to do a different style in another show or another location or different. So it was constantly coming up with new ways of how to make the numbers different from each other, because again, like they didn't change costumes that often. Like they didn't come back in something really different, or so it was kind of capitalizing on each of the songs. Like what's the bottom line of each song, and what story do we need to tell in this number? And that's kind of what dictated how it all went. I mean, definitely, with the news bags and things like that, it just was like, what could they get their hands on, really? I mean, that's so when it came to King of New York, it was fun because it was like, oh great, okay, so we're in this little restaurant, so we can use spoons and we can use glasses and we can use, so it was like, what could they get their hands on to give it a different color? But yeah, I mean, most of the kind of props and everything that were inspired, like mainly were in situation.
One of the coolest things about Newsies, as far as the marketing goes, is like, how happy were you to see that a dance move was the poster that promoted this show? Because that's not super typical either, but like that iconic poster of Newsies is a huge dance move in the show.
It was, that was, I mean, it was so special. And there was now friend Pia Catton. She was writing for, I think it was the Wall Street Journal at the time, and she did a whole piece on just that jump. It was really beautiful, like the way she dissected it, and the way she explained, like she, without even speaking to me, she saw that picture and understood that, like, this hand means this. Notice the flex feet. So it was such a beautiful article, and it meant a lot that people kind of understood and got what dance was going to do in this show and how it could help, because that really is, that was kind of the pitch, was these boys are, the whole show is about them wanting a seat at the table, and I always say that's what I think part of the magic of this show was, whether people realized it or not, but you're watching this really, this group of young guys mainly, and women, but mainly guys, but Kara is a star in her own right. But you're watching these young performers who, the same thing, they don't want any handout. They're not afraid to work for anything. They just want a seat at the table, which in the story is for work, but in our show on Broadway and to be a part of the community. So you have these guys up there who are dancing and performing and singing and getting to show off what makes them special. And you're watching this happen in real time. You're watching these young performers like earn a seat at the table by working hard and doing what they do and doing what they love. So it's kind of like running this parallel track. It's like, it's supporting the story, but it's also supporting what you're seeing in front of you. Like as we're looking back on these 10 years, I mean, look at where, you can look at anyone in that cast and like chart where they are right now. And I'm so proud of every single one of them, because they've all just continue to explode in terms of just being who they are and what they're accomplishing and doing what they love. And so it's to me, that was one of the most special parts about the show, because that's rare. It's rare that you can experience something kind of in the moment firsthand that is supporting the story, but also kind of it's what the story is about. So it was that was really special part of the show to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I honestly have like thought about like, what is it about this show that I'm so obsessed with? And I'm like, okay, Alan Menken music, like check. Obviously, I love that. Like, I love the performances. I love the visual appeal of the show. But then one day I was like, no, it's really the David and Goliath story for me. Like, I've always been the person that fights for, the individual over the corporation. And then when I figured out that's what I love so much about it, and that's such a personality trait for me, I found it super ironic that the giant corporation of Disney is the one telling this story. But in any case, yes, as you said, the guys have gone on to do amazing things. We're recording this just before Oscar Sunday, and how exciting to see so many Newsies in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. Like, that's amazing.
And that's exactly like just one example of like how they're all exploding everywhere. And that's, Pulitzer said, there's that line at the end of the show that he says about, it's Roosevelt, about, the current generation, kind of making room for the new. And I think it would always kind of get a lump in my throat there. And also when Kara sings Watch What Happens, when she says, there's a line that Jack wrote about, those kids will live and breathe right on the page. And once they're center stage, you watch what happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally that's them. But then then the other one is just look around at the world we're inheriting and think of the one we'll create. I mean, that is like, that's our cast, you know, like it's so I feel like they took, you know, the world that they're in. And then I think what they've inspired in other performers and other shows, I think he was kind of like foreseeing it in that song. So anyway, so that was a kind of another biggie for me, because it was so true. The whole song actually, and Cara just performed it so impeccably. She would get me every time. But
yeah, I think that's my favorite new song in the show. Like and even the reprise of that. I love the reprise of that in Act 2 as well. It's so good. But let's talk about The World Will Know for a second, because I love the energy of this number. It's quite a bit angrier than we hear in the movie, and it brought a new energy to it. The choreography feels a bit different from the rest of the show in this number as well. I don't know. Am I imagining that, or was that purposeful?
It was. Each of the songs like kind of chart their growth. In the kind of charting, to me, that was their last phase of being young in terms of like Carrying the Banner was them young and rough around the edges and individual. So it's them running through the streets, and like that's why all the different sections had groups doing different things, because it was them kind of not really banded as brothers yet, but they all were kind of hovering around that in terms of like their love and their passion about what they do. And that's why there were like flexed feet at the top, because it was rough around the edges. And I wasn't, you know, super crazy about specificity in terms of like everyone hitting the same angles and lines, because you wanted to see like a group of individuals in that situation. And then as it moves forward is when they start to band together, and you see them coming together. So that's why the choreography starts to get a little more unified, and they're doing things a little bit more together, but still with like a youthful, like rage kind of energy. You know, it's the kind of like explosiveness that younger kids may feel like if they have a bad day, or, you know, that it's kind of like just this rough anger. And then Seize the Day is where they kind of, that's where they like kind of turn into men in that number. And they get, so instead of fighting, instead of like being angry, it's like they choose a more adult approach, and they really come together in that. And that's when like feet start to point, arms start to straighten, they get more unified physically, so that you see that it's this band of brothers kind of like now they're all working together. And that's how change happens, is when people come together, and that's what makes change. So that's kind of there were steps that kind of we had to kind of chart through, even physically, to kind of help tell that story with them.
I love that. And, you know, Seize the Day is obviously a showstopper. I mean, how often did that number get a standing ovation in the middle of the show, which is, once again, so rare. Like, what a number. And talk about just build the energy in the room is insane. Even as an audience member sitting there doing nothing, like you can feel what the guys are feeling. Like, it's wild.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, and that's to all of the creators' credit, of like building up to that moment. Like, you have to build the blocks properly. And I felt like, you know, everyone on the team just, they built the right road to get to that moment. And so like when you finally have them kind of start to, you know, we call it like Dance for Life, is like when they finally start, when the music kicks in, it's like they've been holding it. You've been waiting for this moment, because you know it's going to kind of erupt. And I think that's so the build up, I think, was also part of the excitement in there. And then, yeah, I mean, that the first time that came together in the room was like, I get lumped my throat thinking of that, because you could see these boys, like what they just did. And it just was really, really, really special. And they kind of, I think everyone knew that day that like, that there was something really special going on.
Yeah, it's amazing. This is perhaps a really naive question, but when it comes to choreography, is it something that's copyrightable, or how does that work? Like, obviously in Seize the Day, the dancing on the newspapers and ripping them apart has become super iconic with Newsies, but Is that something that like any regional production can do in their production, or is choreography supposed to be changed? How does that work?
That's a great question that we're actually all. It's kind of a big topic right now because choreographers are starting to get like shows or movies or anything are starting to have iconic moments because of choreography. And no, we've never really been protected like that before. And so there's a big group and a big push now to figure out a way, to kind of protect that, because, that is kind of like your idea and you're kind of like branding something. But so it's a kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I see both sides of the conversation too, because like, I'll just speak to that moment. Like if a school is going to do Newsies and they want to do the paper dance, like who am I to say don't do it? Like I say do it, because like if that inspired them, that's just exciting to me to think that like they would want to do something like that and it would make their production fun for them to get to do, but I do see how, other aspects of that, like if it is a professional production, or if it is, I've had to go watch, not Newsies, but I've had to go watch other shows that I've done like on tour that were under a different creative team that like did do things that we did. And, and we'd have to talk to the union about it. And so and that kind of stuff gets really messy and icky. So that's why I'm happy that this conversation is finally starting, because hopefully we can create a language that's understood by everyone, that like, sure, we could do this, but maybe not this, or that, this tier, like schools can do it, but maybe not on it if you're calling something a professional production with a different, name or something like that. But that's an ongoing conversation. But it's interesting you bring it up, for sure, that you notice that.
Well, it's a really tough conversation as well, because I mean, there are shows that simply have iconic choreography. A show like Cats, you expect a certain dance move in that show. Newsies, you expect certain dance moves as an audience member. So I don't know, is it something like, are there credits now where it would say like original choreography by Christopher Gattelli, and any program of Newsies using similar choreography? I don't know. That's a very tough conversation to have, and I honestly don't know what the best solution is, nor is it my job. So,
well, sometimes they do. I mean, and that has been done. Actually, there was a production that was done, I think, in Westport this past year, and one of our Newsies said it. Chaz Walcott from the tour. It was like he choreographed it, but it was based on original choreography by Christopher Gattelli. That way, that let him do all of his favorite stuff. But if he wanted to throw in some stuff, which I was like, Chaz, do it. I mean, like, go for it. Like, make my stuff better. Like, fix it. So it gave him the freedom to also do what he wanted to do. And I love that. And I think, or inspired by, I think is good. That happened a bunch with Altar Boys too. When I did Altar Boys off Broadway and it started getting done soon after, there was a DVD that we made like of the steps. So like, if you want to do it, you can do the original work and, say inspired by or something based on or something like that. But yeah, again, that's why there are so many different levels to the conversation. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it shakes down for sure.
I think giving the proper credit is probably the best way to go. But like I said, not my choice, but it is an interesting conversation. As I mentioned, you won numerous awards for your choreography in Newsies, including the coveted Tony Award. Do you remember that night, and did you feel confident walking into it?
I mean, I remember, and it was exciting. And I said before, like it is, people say like, oh, it's just an honor to be nominated, but it truly, really is. And I had been down that road with South Pacific before. And I remember for South Pacific being so nervous about the whole thing, because I didn't even think something like that would ever happen in my life. So it was kind of like, okay, here's a nomination and here's a step and repeat and here's this. And it was so overwhelming because I just couldn't believe it, that I didn't really enjoy it because I was just kind of nervous and, anxious. And so for Newsies, I just remember I was like, no matter what people are saying or what is happening, I just want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy the ride this time, because, you can't ever really predict, but you can kind of at least enjoy the process. That year did feel particularly good. I mean, not just because Newsies won, but because I just felt it was nice to enjoy the process of the experience of it, because it is such a rare thing. So yeah, it was a really great night.
That's awesome. Now, you probably won't say it, but I will. Newsies was robbed of Best New Musical that year.
Oh, God.
Biggest upset. And like, I remember the Avenue Q Wicked upset, but I'm sorry. I was so upset. Newsies is, it's just such like a once in a generation kind of show. I was like, how could this not win Best New Musical? But perhaps I'm biased. I don't know. In any case, after Broadway, it goes on tour and eventually is pro shot at the Pantages Theater in Hollywood. Were you there for that taping?
I was. Oh my God.
You guys must have been so proud. And you'd been shooting for like that whole week beforehand as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think they took such great care of it in terms of like really getting the shots, really taking the time, like they closed down the production for a week just so that we could get all of the extra footage to make sure it was shot well and shot, and that it was clean, and just in case something happened during the taping. And so it was really nice, the care they put into taping it so well. And then I think that the most exciting part of it was, I remember speaking to the cast before the show, and it was like, everyone just like get out there and just like have the best time, like it's going to be a fun audience, like ride that energy and just like know that everything is already in the can. Like we've already shot it. It's already been like, so it's like, if you fall or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like this one's for you. Like just get out there and have the best time. And it was just, and like them, like you could feel the release of them after a full week of like really wanting to stick things and make it good. And that of like, they're like, yeah, like we're just going to go out there. We're going to do it. And like, so they did it. The audience was so there with them. It was just an electric kind of performance. It was really, really special.
I love that. That's great that message of go have fun. We've already got it in the can. This is, the icing on top, and all the audience members certainly appreciated it because it was truly an amazing night, one of the most unforgettable theatrical experiences of my life. And I mean, also just the scheduling of getting all of those original cast members back, like that's not an easy thing to do because, as you said, they're all very successful now doing their own things. And it's wild that exists. I love that it will exist forever now. People can go to Disney Plus and watch it whenever they want. And that's the complete opposite of what live theater typically is. And listen, nothing will be the same experience as sitting in a theater seeing something live. But I love that this whole pro shot thing is becoming more and more common, and I really hope that it continues. And I know a lot of them have to be shot outside of New York City because of like difficulties with unions and such. I wish that they would figure that out as well, because I feel like, especially a show that maybe doesn't do super well, like every show should be able to live on beyond its run, and we have the technology to do it today. So,
for sure.
Yeah. Other than the choreography and the people involved, what is your favorite thing about or favorite memory of Newsies?
Oh my gosh.
Was there something like, was there a song the first time you heard it, you were just like, oh my gosh, or I don't know, any specific moment, or was it just opening night on Broadway, or?
Gosh, there's so many highlights to it. I think it was the first day of auditions, though, actually was one of my favorite memories. I know I talked about the final callback because it was a different thing, but I felt like when we went into the open calls, like first of all, there were 1,100 boys that auditioned.
Wow.
We literally there were so many people came out for it. That's when we started. It was like, like there were kids drove across the country to be seen. And this was just for Paper Mill still. Like there was no promise of anything. But kids drove all the way across the country. We had 2 rooms going on. I remember my associate Lou was in one room. I was in the other room. Like he would teach, like we just had to rotate because we weren't going to make it through the day. And I was really adamant to see everyone because I just think that's fair, especially at kids at that age who may not be equity and think, and we gave a bunch of their equity cards too, but they're so young. How could they, have that experience yet? So I remember the first day and seeing like 1,100 guys, but in those auditions, seeing what was possible. Like I remember when we put the combination together, we always have a little story behind it. And so we did the whole thing, and I have a list of like check boxes, like, okay, they should be able to do like a nice clean double. They should be able to do, but I have like a hit list of things I look for and that I build into it. And just for fun, I put in a double tour, which is the jump they do right at the top of when the music kicks in, it sees the day. They do the little attitude turn, then they do the pirouette and do it like a double jump in the air. And I put that into the combination because I was like, well, it would be if a few guys could do that's the kind of technical skill I'd like to bring into the production, is that kind of, skill and technique. And like, so when we get to seize the day, they can handle that kind of movement. And I was expecting like, 2 or 3 people to do it. Maybe, because a side note to that is because when I was training, I studied at Alvin Ailey School for a bit, and we had a specific men's class that we took twice a week, and that we were practicing that specific jump, the double tour. And I remember the ballet teacher saying, guys, this is a good one to get, because this really shows the mark of a male dancer, because it incorporates everything you need to do. You need to turn, you need to jump, you need to spot, you need to like all of these things. And he said, if you can land a double tour clean, it's like a female hitting a high C in an opera. And that always stuck with me as something that like not everyone can do it, that like you really have to be technically proficient and on your game to be able to do something like that. And then, so again, I put that in the combination, and then like all of a sudden, like all of these guys, so many guys could do it. And it was like, oh my God. And so I remember feeling not only like excited about like the day, but about the future of the show that day as well, because I knew, I was like, we're going to be able to do things in the show that people you can never see in a show. Like, we're going to get a group of guys that are going to like knock people's socks off that people can't usually do what this group will be able to do. And then they came in and they could sing, and it was like, oh man, we're going to have the time of our lives on this one, because you could basically do whatever you want. So that was kind of, that's kind of like an inside thing of mine, that like when you see those guys do that jump, to me, like that's like if you have a stage of like 20 women hitting a high C at the same time, like that's the equivalent, like that's the kind of force that they're putting out at Pulitzer there. So it was kind of amazing that we could even just do it. It's just in general, like you don't ever really see that. So that's where that whole kind of trickles down from. But yeah, that first audition day was pretty special.
That's awesome. Now we're wrapping up here, but I want to know, beyond Newsies, is there another Disney movie you'd like to see put on stage that you would love to choreograph or even direct, as you do that as well?
I am actually.
Oh, you're working on a Disney thing right now?
Yep. Yeah.
Is it Hocus Pocus?
It's not Hocus Pocus. I think I can say it because it was announced lightly, but it's Jungle Book. I'm directing and choreographing that one.
Oh, nice. Where's that supposed to start?
That's why we're kind of just formatting the show now, and kind of Disney. They're really great about finding the right space for the right show, like they do for all of them. But same like for Newsies, for example, like it was great that it was at Paper Mill, because it gave us exactly what we needed to kind of do it there and test it out and see what would happen. And luckily it went forward. So, and Jungle Book, again, there are no guarantees or anything like that. So it'll be like, once we see what the show actually comes to and like what it turns into, I think they'll be like, oh, it should start here, or oh, it should start in London, or oh, it should start, wherever. But I think, yeah, we'll see when the time comes, but I'm definitely really, really excited about it.
Well, selfishly, I'm going to say come to La Jolla so that I can go see it easily. Okay.
Okay.
That's super cool that you're doing that. You mentioned the UK. Newsies is going to the UK for the first time, and it's going to be done in the round. That's kind of exciting. Yeah. Such a big dance show, to like see it from every angle in the round is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. And it's supposed to be a really big venue too. I don't really know it, but yeah.
Now, before I let you go, I need to ask you about a couple of other projects, because I'm obsessed with them. I didn't realize this, that you were the resident choreographer of the Rosie O'Donnell show. What was that job like? Were you a full-time staff member on that show? Because holy crap, talk about a nerdy theater kid. Like, that was an obsession.
Well, kind of more or less. It was like, because at the time, she loved Broadway and she loved to promote Broadway and do numbers. And so if other shows would come on, it would basically be like they would kind of take the stage. But whenever it was something like with her staff, or if she was promoting a product, or if she was, like she started, I mean, God, there were so many. She did something with Nickelodeon. She did something like I think she had this group at the time called the Chub Club, which was like promoting like fitness and weight loss and things like that. And so like whenever she had to do a number that was like something like a one-off like that, I would go in. So I wouldn't say it was like on staff as on like a daily basis, but I was there pretty much almost every week for a while. It was kind of amazing because it was really my first job as a choreographer, like official job. And Jerry Mitchell was doing it for a while. And then he went over to do Full Monty. And then when he left and they needed someone, she happened to just see a piece I did for Broadway Cares. And she was like, oh, get him. He's funny. And so it was kind of not trial by fire in a bad way, but it was kind of like a learning on the job experience because I hadn't done anything like that before. But it was an incredible experience. She was so gracious and amazing to work with. And it was such a fun time for sure.
And that's awesome to hear because I love Rosie. I love the Rosie O'Donnell show. I know sometimes we hear stories about talk shows not being as fun to work on as they are to watch. So whenever someone says it was a blast to do, I love hearing that, especially about the Rosie O'Donnell show.
She was so nice.
Yeah. Now, you also directed a production of a mutual love of ours, kind of how we connected on social media in the first place, Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, this past holiday season and previous ones. Just for a second, please talk about your love of this holiday special, because my listeners have heard me rave about it for years, and if at this point they haven't checked it out from me, perhaps they'll listen to you over me.
It's so good. It really was like a holiday tradition in our family, and kind of still is. It's like it's I don't know. It's something about it that it's the Muppets are so beautiful and the puppetry is so incredible anyway. But I think the story just is such a special story. I mean, it literally is just like one of I don't know. I think it's like one of the best tales originally done by O. Henry. And it's just Gifts of the Magi was what it was based on. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful story. And then you put Paul Williams' music on top of it. And it was, I mean, just obsessed. And it was the same thing that where I had done a production of this Fringe show called Silence of the Lambs, a silence musical. And someone, Tim McDonald, who we ended up co-writing the book together, he was working for MTI at the time, and he took me out to lunch, and it was kind of like a get to know you lunch. And he said, if there's any production of a musical you could do, what would you do? And I think he was talking about like maybe something in the catalog, like a Dreamgirls or like a, Pippin or something. And I said, well, it hasn't been done yet. And it's called Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. And he's like, wait, it's so weird that you're saying that. He's like, there's a DVD in my inbox, because Paul Williams was represented by Bugsy Malone with them. So they have the catalog of Bugsy Malone. So I think someone sent it in like to have them look at it. And I was like, oh, you're going to love it. Wait till you see it. It's the best. And he watched it and he was like, we're doing this. He's like, let's get it together. He's like, you'll direct it, blah, blah, blah. And so we got in touch with Paul, and he was all excited about it, and just what an honor to work with him. I mean, the sweetest guy ever. And then got in touch with the Hensons, and they were all on board, and they helped make it possible and created all new puppets. And I mean, we got the original Ma and Emmett like out of the museum to use when we did the first production at Goodspeed. I mean, it was one of the most special things I've ever been a part of, like without question. It was just like to have your kind of like childhood like come to life in front of you in that kind of special way. It's kind of like a Newsies too. It's like, it comes back to that, but like an Emmett is like, but to be able to pass it on and share it with new generations, someone who may not have seen it, be able to see it in this form and introduce it to someone is such a gift, and I say that about Newsies too. Like I always say, that like, hopefully this was my way of giving back. Like the way that the movie inspired me, I hope that by doing the musical that I inspired other young male dancers, or just dancers in general. Like, because I think a lot of women are affected by the story and the dancing too. And I would love to see some female Newsies for sure, if we ever get to do it again or something, because I think it's, so it's kind of in that way, it feels like, it felt like a nice responsibility, like a good responsibility to have, is to kind of like pass these things along to other generations in different ways. So, but Emmett was definitely one of like the special ones for sure.
I got to see it at good speed, I think in its second year, and you were talking a little bit earlier about how Disney likes to find the right place to, launch these projects, and talk about the perfect place for Emmett Otter. Like, I had never been to Goodspeed before, but holy crap, like, you're literally the theater's sitting along the river, which is a big part of the story. Like, it was perfection and just amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it really was. It was like, and we even had a little, Ana Luisa, our set designer, even put a little nod in like the little set from Waterville. It was one of my favorite transitions, right? Actually. Like, there's a ground row of houses, and in the center was the opera house, like a suite, like a small town version of it. And so, and we did a transition using that. But it was like you would walk outside after finishing the show and just be like, oh my God, we're in the show. Like it was really perfect to do it there.
Yeah, I always say, and I know that this is not a light statement, but it is genuinely my favorite thing that the Jim Henson Company has ever done. I love it. And I love that there was so much care. I mean, clearly you're a huge fan. That shot of the bird coming out of the water with the sunset behind it, and the fact that you recreated that on stage, like I think I gasped in the theater when I saw that. I was just like, oh my God, like whoever is doing this loves everything as much as I do about this. And it was like this form of jealousy that I wasn't involved, yet joy, because I was like, at least it exists and like people are getting to experience this. And obviously it's living on a bit. I know you did it, a production this past Christmas. I got to see the stream of that. And so hopefully, it lives on for a long time and introduces a lot of people to it. It's great. Anyway, this became the Emmett Otter podcast because that tends to happen with me. Anyway, Chris, you've given so much of your time. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm excited to see the stuff you have going on in the future, and seize the day, and happy 10th anniversary to Newsies, the musical. Unbelievable.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you're a fellow fan of Newsies, there are several other Disney Coast to Coast episodes you'll definitely want to check out if you haven't already. Don't miss my interview with the Broadway musical's director, Jeff Calhoun, plus an episode all about what it was like to be at the live filming at the Pantages Theater in Hollywood, an interview with the author of Newsies versus the World, where we discuss the film and show's historic accuracy, a conversation with the film's production designer, and even some short interviews with some of the newsboys themselves. I have a lot of Newsies content waiting for you, so simply click on the show notes link in this episode's description to check those out. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Dizney, with a Z, Coast to Coast on your favorite podcast app. If you enjoy this show, consider supporting it at no extra cost to you, in fact you'll save, by using the discount code DCTC at Souvenir Scents, where they're creating scented candles and wax melts that give you sense memories of your favorite theme park attractions. Check out everything they have to offer by clicking the Souvenir Scents link in this episode's description, and don't forget to use discount code DCTC at checkout to save 15% off of your entire order. Now, this episode has been executive produced by Robert Scontrino. Gain rewards like Robert, including access to never-before-heard episodes and live-stream Q&As by visiting the Patreon link in this episode's description. And don't forget that I'll be matching 100% of your first month subscription to the charity Save the Music, which helps to support music education in schools, for all new patrons joining this month, March of 2022. And if you join beyond that, I'll be supporting another charity each following month. Basically, anything you need can be found in this episode's description. From additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. This podcast is part of the DePodcast Network. Learn more about this show, plus find more quality and entertaining podcasts at DePodcastNetwork.com. That's DEPodcastNetwork.com.